Henry, do you know what time it is? Q&A time. Brilliant. Welcome to this session of 9-Hole Reviews. Guys, welcome into the 2019 holiday special where we're going to be doing a Q&A session, answering some questions from our valued patrons of Patreon. I'm here with Henry, I'm Josh, and you're watching 9-Hole Reviews.
So these questions are aggregated through a season. We gather them up from the patrons, and then we basically deposit it right here. We kind of do a once-over, but this is a pretty raw cut of how it goes.
Yeah.
So without further ado, lead us
When
off, Josh.
Enjoying some fine scotch, some guns.
Yeah.
And our first question comes from Stephen W., who asks, would you consider running the pistol course with the same pistol but changing out different types of sights and optics? For example, a Glock 17 MOS with an RMR, and then switch to a Delta Point Pro, fiber sights, and to establish a baseline for sighting systems opposed to a baseline just for firearms.
Now, I think this is a question for you, because the pistols that I run typically do not have any capability of taking an RMR.
Or switching their iron sights.
Indeed, yes. Yeah. So take it away.
I think it's a great question, and it gets to the heart of something that you and I have been talking about behind the scenes for a decent amount of time, which is whether or not we should be expanding our review sessions beyond just the basis of a specific firearm or family of firearms and extending them to optics, which is something that, although we haven't really progressed that so far as of the filming of this video, we know that it is something that we want to do. So bringing forward optic reviews with down the scope style footage, seeing what the reticles look like, seeing what we're seeing when we're on the trigger. That's something we want to do moving forward, and that we're going to start kind of establishing a baseline for. When it comes to shooting close range PA specifically, to answer the question directly, so much of the close range PA comes down to training and time on a system. So switching between, say, two optics, for example, if there is one that I shoot more frequently, I'm implicitly going to have a bias towards that in some way, shape, or form. Even with irons over optics, I shoot irons almost exclusively on pistols. My iron score would be disproportionate to my optic score. It might not be better than my optic score per se, but my iron score would be disproportionate to if I were to spend an equivalent amount of time training on optics on pistols. So just take that into consideration. I mean, I'm not saying that we wouldn't do something like that. It would be an interesting thing to test. I think most of the optics would come in about the same score, and most of the irons would come in relatively close. I think fiber optic front sight with a blacked out rear is my preferred sighting system for irons. It's what I shoot in matches, and that would probably be the best iron sighting score I could put up. But yeah, I think that a lot of that comes down to time spent training on a system. And so and that's not untrue of the guns that we're shooting as well, but to a lesser degree, because we're shooting such a wide variety of firearms, it's a little bit less so.
I would say that we do have a few close range PA items that are coming up. Not necessarily that we're comparing the sighting system, but we're comparing the automatic versus semi-automatic capabilities.
Yes, true. Yep.
So to that question, it sort of answers sort of yes, in that we're using the firearm in a different firing mode.
Right. Yes. Same gun, but shot in different modes to test how well it goes. Yeah. Agree.
So,
Stephen, thanks for the question. Next up, we've got Brian S. And Brian asks, is there a rifle or a pistol that you would like to try running on either of the courses?
Okay.
I've got mine already.
Go ahead, Josh.
One thing that we haven't gotten a chance to show yet on the courses is, on both courses, is a 5.45 short-barreled firearm. And that's something that I'd be really interested to test out for a couple of reasons. A, I know we haven't really expanded our close range to shooting carbines of any sort or battle rifles at this point. That aside, shooting 5.45 up close is a blast. You know, the AKs that we've tested, the Kalash systems that are in 5.45 that I've gotten a chance to whale on up close have been awesome to shoot, super soft, super fun to shoot. Very similar to 5.56 out of an AR platform, you know, as close as you can get, I suppose, with the Kalash. But we've been super impressed with how 5.45 has done at range, and more on that to come in the future, I think. Not just what we've already got posted on the channel, which in and of itself has been impressive.
I think the very, very soon future.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
So there will be some more evidence as to the 5.45's performance on the range and why I would be interested to shoot a short barrel version of that, some form of a crank off. So that's that would be my answer for.
So something that we're looking forward to shooting, I think for me. So as I came back from Afghanistan, I actually came back to Germany. So I didn't actually come back stateside. But while I was in Afghanistan, I sent a number of curios stateside for someone to receive. And one of said curios is a British Martini Henry that was somehow, I wasn't able to trace how it got re-arsenaled into the Kabul arsenal. And I've got, legally, I imported it back stateside. I have to stress that because I like my dogs. So I've got that currently sitting in the safe. But outside of a formed casing with an empty primer, I have not shot any live rounds, live cartridges through it. So a lot of times when I shoot a rifle, I like to deliberately learn about historical models, and I very regretfully did not ship a label that I had in my hands back stateside, but I did ship the Martini Henry. And so I got the dies for it, I have the powder for it, I still need to purchase the projectiles and manufacture the projectiles and actually learn how the system works, because a lot of that goes back to, it's almost like you're time traveling with a piece of item from the late 1800s. I mean, and you're shooting it. I mean, that's proper old. And so I've actually been talking to Rob over at British Muzzleloaders and actually learning a lot about the Martini Henry. And unfortunately, because of our workload, I just haven't made a lot of leeway. I haven't made a lot of headway on that outside of forming the cases, which in itself is a laborious task because you use shot shell, like shot shell brass holes, and you squeeze them after you anneal them into the little Martini cases, and then you have to cut the length. And that's not it, because when you load black powder, you also have to fill the space and put a grease disc behind it. All of this type of stuff, I've been learning about how to do it, and so that's one of the rifles that we have. I haven't talked a lot about it, but I can't wait to shoot it, but I know it's going to be just a metric ton of work until we get to the point of shooting it. And then I have to load 40 of these cartridges at the very minimum.
Yeah, and then get a zero at two. So
yes,
it'll be a bit of work.
Yes.
Well, I think in terms of the question, that's probably it. I think something our viewers are going to be interested in seeing is something we've got on the table, which is this right here.
This one is a Type 56 Chinese SKS.
I don't know how many people have requested this, but it's here now, which means sometime in the next few months we'll be out on the range with it.
Yes.
And then finally getting the time to edit it and put it out for consumption.
Yeah. So I have zeroed this already, so prep work's already done.
Very good. You heard it here. Thanks, Brian. Next up from Bobby M. We have a request to shoot a specific firearm, the Smith & Wesson M&P 380 which is a locked breech 380 opposed to straight blowback, and the interest is to put it up against the straight blowback and the PPK that we've already just published, which I hated, as many people know.
It's yours.
Yeah, I know, it's in the safe at the moment.
It's yours.
So I think I don't see any reason why we wouldn't shoot more 380 pistols.
Yeah. Well,
specifically, if it's, especially if we can find a reason to do it where it's contrasting another one that we've already shot. I've got no reason not to do it.
I would say this, Josh. A lot of times it just comes down to time and the backlog that we have. I mean, right now we have 6 months worth of backlog for everything that we have.
Which is a good problem to have for you guys.
It is. So we're very flattered or very humbled by the amount of support and generosity of the community, of guys sending stuff in for us to look at. It's incredible. We're still doing this part-time, and so we have to still ration the time to go out and get this stuff done.
Yep.
So not saying that said video is an impossibility.
Yep.
But there is a wide scale of things, and I would say, if we're out on the range and we're looking at, should we do this pocket pistol, or should we do, like I've got my Luger and P38, something that's
Right.
iconic,
Right.
that I know has a wide tie to things. Like the P38's a grandfather of the M9 and a whole lot of different pistols.
Right.
The double action pistols. I mean, that's where a lot of it comes from.
100% agree.
So, long story short,
prioritization is, I think, what you're talking about, and what it comes down to then to answer the question directly, or maybe to talk around the question a bit more, is we get requests to do a bunch of different guns. In every one of the videos, if you scroll down to the comments, there's questions about, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And in some cases, we've already got some of the guns on hand to do those very tests, but there's 10 guns in front of those that we're already slated up doing. And on some of them, as Henry says, it's something where it's like, there may be a much more niche style firearm that somebody's asking for, that it's probably going to be closer to the bottom of the list in terms of the level of other stuff that we've got going on.
Look, I would say this. If someone shipped in offered a Sturmgewehr, top of the list. All good. So that also has a precedence on your priority, right?
Sure.
It's sometimes the rarity of a firearm. We don't know if we have another opportunity of doing something that's historical like that.
And we don't necessarily have infinite amount of time to do it either.
Right. So
it might need to be turned and done quickly, so we end up prioritizing. 100% agree.
Sure. So I mean, that's a really long answer to that question.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Essentially that.
Yep. All right. Next up is another question from Brian S., which is the one rifle and pistol that we each dread having to shoot.
Mine's easy, but I'll let you go first.
Okay. So you guys saw me shoot the PPK and the Mac Rock. The Mac was actually okay. I think I did okay with the Mac.
Yeah.
The PPK was pretty rough. It tore up my hand. I've got scars still all over my hand from that. But basically, any time that you have to shoot a pistol that is in the hyper subcompact variety, but chambered in a full size cartridge like 9mm, 40, 45, those are going to be the least comfortable, most frustrating to shoot. So I'm thinking about things like, I don't know, the Beretta Nano is just one that comes to mind. It's a 9mm. That's like subcompact, but it's a 9mm, and it stinks having to shoot that type of a firearm. And that's not to bag on Beretta specifically, but there are any of the brands out there who make a subcompact, really subcompact pocket rocket style pistol, but chamber it in a full size cartridge like 9mm. Those are absolutely the ones that I dread having to do in the future, and I've avoided them at all possible turns, and I want to shoot only full-size pistols from here on out, Henry.
I have a question. If somebody sent a Liberator pistol in, would you shoot it?
I don't even know what that is.
You don't know what a Liberator is?
No, what's that one?
Hold on, I will look this up for Josh. And so back in the day, when America was going into Europe, they airdropped a bunch of like.
Oh, are these the tiny little like they look like a squirt gun almost?
Yeah. It doesn't look like a real gun. It just looks like.
Yeah. Okay,
it's like a tin.
right,
It looks like a tin can, and like it takes 5 minutes to load because you have to like cock it back and do a whole lot of stuff and pry it out.
I mean.
Anyways, Josh knows what a Liberator is now, so
for science, I suppose I'd have to. For science.
Very brave of you.
All right, so what about you? What's the one that you're dreading having to shoot? Especially, all right, so I gave a more hypothetical answer of like a possible answer. There's a gun that I know we have on hand.
Well, it's right here. It was actually supposed to be a part of a separate video that we're about to film. It's actually been on the show, and it's actually one of the highest grossing views. This is the Kar 98K with the ZF41 Scout Sniper Scope. This was a 1.5 times scope that was developed by the Wehrmacht as a quick deployment for sniper systems, or for designated marksmanship systems. Essentially, I feel like it's an acknowledgement that their sights are terrible, so they needed a new sighting system. However, they made the sighting system unholy difficult to sight in. So, and it's interesting because we actually ended up getting some notes from one of the viewers who knew a former German sniper who was still alive to give us feedback on the 41s and the 39s, and we will be talking a little bit more in depth about it. But the reason I dread shooting this is because of how difficult it is to sight in. Typically it takes me, what, 8 to 10 rounds in a rifle zero?
8 to 10 shots to draw an appropriate zero. Yeah.
This took me 120 rounds.
How was the old shoulder feeling?
It looked like I came back from a Krav Maga session, and honestly, it wasn't even just that. It was the fact that while you're zeroing it. Okay, I think we need to dial back. A gross amount of the time that I spend, that's agonizing for me, is not necessarily at the point of shooting it on range. Recoil is one thing. I mean, 30 to 40 rounds, even you're really stout, I could put like a little, the shameful limb saver on the back, and it would do just fine. It's not about that. It's about the prep work, because we actually want to get the sights working right. You know, and the 100 or so rounds was just to get it working right, not even to check whether the sights were doing well. So I would say terrible sighting system designs, whether it's iron sights or the actual...
Oh, those are the ones that you dread shooting because of all the time it takes to get it to a point where we're comfortable to actually try it on the course.
And on that note, I mean, the 98K, in my opinion, the Barleycorn iron sights are some of the worst that the world has seen.
Yeah.
And
so that's a good segue, and then to a question from John B, who asks, what is your basic process for prepping a practical accuracy run?
So I guess we're talking about the rifles?
Well, why don't you talk rifles, because you're usually prepping most of the rifles. I'll talk pistols and shotguns.
Typically, I zero the rifle. I make sure that the rifle, in fact, functions.
Yeah.
It's crazy to say that, but sometimes they don't, and they have to go for repair and a whole bunch of things figured out on it.
And I think to that point, most of the time the stuff that we're shooting is not rack guns, right? So when we talk about reviews and whether or not they're running or functioning, it's not about whether or not a specific brand or company or gun is good and functions. It's more so a matter of, does the model that we've just received, that's whether it's ancient and you're bringing it back up to speed, or if it's had somebody do whatever to it, I think it's more along those lines, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the prep work behind it really is making sure it functions, making sure that the rifle is in fact zeroed for the sighting system that we're used. So the 100 meter or yards corresponds to in fact the 100 meter or yards, and if we need to after that true the zero at 400, then we do it on the range.
Yeah. Yeah, the day of,
yeah.
shooting, right.
So that's typically it.
But I mean, how many rounds are we normally shooting on rifles to get ready for a PA session?
Well, it depends. It depends on if the rifle does well.
Right, so let's assume that you draw a 0 and it's relatively good right off the bat. I mean, how many rounds are you shooting before we take it to 5, 6, 7, 8, 1,000 yards?
Like, say, like it's a precision rifle or a DMR?
I mean, whatever.
Typically, it takes me about 8 to 10 rounds to, if the rifle is in fact functioning and at least battle zeroed. So post the 25-meter battle zero, I'd say it takes me about 8 to 10 shots to walk it into the area, and then I confirm with, about 5 shots or so.
Right.
And then if it confirms 0, then we take it out. If it does not need to be trued, at that point, we just shoot it.
Right.
If it needs to be trued, we true it at the 400-meter mark.
Yep. So my point there being, or the reason I asked that question is a lot of times we get people asking or like commenting like, oh, you should be able to make this shot with X, Y, or Z, but most of the time our preparation does not include a dry run.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So most of the time what we're doing is it's basically like we're treating these as if they're quote unquote battlefield pickups to a degree. I mean, we're still drawing a 0 to make sure it's there, but usually it's like, all right, here we go. Let's see if it's on at this range.
And to be honest, that's the only way we could do it. We couldn't spend any more time on each of these systems.
Yeah.
Like, I spend a significant amount of my time nowadays that 9-hole has started, driving around the Houston Metroplex like I'm running guns for an Afghan warlord. And if I ever get pulled over, I mean, just look at this table. This is a very peculiar combination of firearms to find, and this helmet is a very peculiar combination of firearms to find in someone's vehicle. And in fact, I think I would be spending a lot of time explaining if I ever am asked to reveal, in fact, what I have in my vehicle. But the good thing is then I would have the YouTube channel, and maybe, if the officer enjoys shooting, then he would pick it up. But if he does not enjoy shooting, then I'd have to give our lawyer a call. But dialing it back, we spend a lot of time on, when we do prep work, we do them en masse. So we basically try to assembly line certain things. Like we do the entire prep work for a batch of rifles, so say 8 or 10 rifles at once. And then when we go to the range, typically we have 8 or 10 rifles that are already prepared, and we shoot those.
Do whatever we can through there,
We make sure that we have at the very least 60 rounds of ammunition for that rifle. Because when we go to the range, sometimes you never know. 20 rounds just in reserve, 40 rounds for the course at the very minimum.
Yep.
And then that's it. So in one day, we typically arrive quite early, are the first ones on the range. We shoot till we run dry.
Yep.
And sometimes we don't get to running dry.
Yep.
Because we have issues, equipment issues or whatever.
Yep. Not just with the guns we're testing either, but audio, video, all that stuff comes into play too.
On that note, let me check everything. This is fine right here. That's good over there, but it's at the 20-some minute mark. So.
All right, let's just keep rocking.
Okay, next question.
All right, so thanks for that one, John. I think there's a lot that goes into the prep, but way less than I think what people expect. I think people are expecting that we're probably taking these out on dry runs or testing them, and we're just simply not. On the close range PA, I think we usually I usually shoot 5 to 10 shots at the 35-meter target to figure out where the hold is for the particular sighting system and firearm that we're shooting, and that's usually
now
it.
that also has its challenges, because a lot of times I will end up zeroing the rifle or the whatever pistol or subgun for you, but our zeros.
It is pretty crazy. Our eyes are very different.
Yeah,
Henry's zero is about 8 to 10 inches left at 25 yards, or no, 50, 8 to 10 inches left at about 50 from me, which call us crazy, but it's everything we shoot.
Too,
everything we shoot is
it's
like
high
that.
to the left.
Yeah, everything we shoot. So for whatever reason, whether it's how we look through the sights or what, I don't know, but it's just our eyes.
The eye construction is a big thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
Yeah.
so 30 or so rounds to confirm 0 at the long target, right?
No, probably less than that. Probably like 10 rounds to confirm 0. I'll usually shoot a string of 5, and I'll go down, check where they are. If they're dead center, awesome. Usually they're not. Usually I find that like they're off one side or the other, or high or low. The height thing is pretty prevalent on a lot of this stuff because you don't really notice it if all you do is shoot from 10 to 15 yards, or like 0 to 15 yards. The height is negligible, and most sights are set to just be able to point of aim, point of impact at those distances. But when you start extending out on handguns, you may be high, you may be low. You just test them out. It has to do with the sight height relationship of how tall the front is, how tall the rear is. So usually it's that. We shoot it a few times in terms of making sure that it's on paper at the 35, know where we need to hold, and then we start rocking.
Yeah.
And there's really no preparatory work other than that for it. So again, it's pretty skimpy in terms of what you guys are seeing is a very raw run on most of this stuff.
And that's also why we make a note to talk about the rifles and pistols that we are actually trained with.
Yes, exactly. So in the notes section of all of those, you always see like shooter is proficient or has trained a lot with this particular setup.
Like your competition pistol, like the Shadow.
CZ, the CZ Shadow, yeah.
And for me, the M16A4.
Right. I mean, it's those are firearms we've trained on a lot, and you can see that those are the best firearms in our or at the very top of those categories, and a lot of it has to do with our time behind the guns.
I suppose we could in the future cut something to help people on how they digest the material and what they see through it.
Yeah, don't disagree.
Anyways.
So that's actually a really good question. Thank you for that one, John. All right, so next up, we've got a question from Clayton who asks, what is your favorite milsurp? Now, that's a good question for you. For me, it's a little rougher.
Okay, I would phrase it. If I were to phrase this question, potentially, because surplus it's a very specific status of the firearm. So maybe we should say what period of military firearms.
Not necessarily just a surplus, but just break it out by favorite firearm by period.
Yeah, favorite military firearm, or most interesting to you military firearm by period.
Sure, okay, all right.
So currently we have, on our playlist section, we currently have the Great War. Which is World War One, and then we have World War II, and we have Cold War, we have modern.
So let's GWAT to modern, right?
And then we have the abominations, but that's not really this. Anyways,
so if we use those time stables,
so World War One, the Webley revolver would be mine. I very much like the Webley.
And when I think about this, I have a tough time with some of this stuff because my knowledge of the expanse of the different firearms of these, especially pre-World War II, it's really just not there insofar as comparative to what I know about modern firearms and shooting specific. So just as an example, I remember watching the Project Lightning series that was put out 2018, 2019.
Matthias, May, Ian.
And Ian, and I remember watching that and being like, I've not seen any of these before. And thinking it was really cool and like, oh man, I wish I got to be part of that. Maybe I want to be shooting these. But I think like if I think about, just to jump ahead, right, and we'll circle back to it, but I think my ultimate gravitation is always going to be toward some sort of fighting rifle or carbine of some sort that you can mod out, right? Because those are the things that I am so very connected to with what I've done with comp shooting and how I've evolved in what I've learned about performance-based shooting. And so maybe when we think about World War I, what's the equivalent in World War I of like the modern fighting rifle? Does it all go back to the bolt guns that are being used?
So that's a problem. I mean, the whole interest of World War I is that there was no development pre-World War I in that type of fighting. Yeah. I mean, people look at the Lebel, smokeless powder was developed, and then the German, for the Lebel, and then the Germans decided to set the lowest sight setting for the Gewehr 98s. It's at 400 meters.
Yeah.
That's like aiming underneath the belt line for a chest shot. So at this era, they did not prepare to fight World War I with that type of weapon system. They were thinking, mass formation running into it like the Napoleonic times.
Right.
That being said, obviously we know that the Americans were the shotguns, and then you should look up the Pedersen device, which was an interesting concept.
I do actually know that one.
Okay, it's not a very good execution, but it's a very interesting concept. Never actually ended up going on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
The Germans had the MP-18s,
right?
Which was, again, subgun category,
Right.
if we're talking about that. So we're talking like maybe 150 and in, really.
Right.
But I mean, that's what you're looking at. But the Russians did come up with a Fedorov, and you should look up what the Fedorov is, because it's widely acclaimed.
I do not know what that one is.
It's widely acclaimed to be the first assault rifle, and that's a pre-World War II rifle. So anyway,
So interesting, because I've always heard the STG-44 hailed as the first true assault rifle.
it's the first successfully fielded.
The STG.
I would say. I mean, it's assault rifle of year 19. Well,
Yes.
the name changes are crazy with that,
Right.
But it's a Sturmgewehr. It is a Sturmgewehr.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think as we carry into World War
So is that your
II era,
answer
like,
for World War II?
that's an easy. Yeah, I mean, insofar as like, there's other things that I think would be really cool.
Fallschirmjägergewehr?
Oh, the FGG-42.
Yeah,
that
would
would
be
be so cool to shoot. But I think conceptually, if I were to carry on thematically what I'm thinking, yeah, probably.
With the Sturmgewehr?
Yeah, probably so.
For me, World War II. I mean, the rifle that interests me the most, the reason why I like shooting it so much, is the number 4.
Yeah.
I like the Lee Enfield system. I think it's a beautiful system. I like the feel of it. I like how it shoots. I like the cartridge for the era.
Yeah.
I think it's a good system. And for that matter, I would really, really, really like a Lee Enfield number 4 Mark 1T, a proper one.
Yeah, not the faux T.
With a real number 32 scope. But alas. So after that, Cold War.
It's got to be Kalash-based for me. I have grown to absolutely love the Kalash-based firearms from all of the work that we've done here on 9-hole.
Yeah.
Getting to shoot this, getting to shoot the 103. I know we haven't done an official full classic on that, but we got to shoot it on the PA course, and I know we shot a bunch of it close range as well at the time. My own 104, the one that we've got waiting in the wings that we're building with Mike up our gunsmith Mike. It's been such a blast to shoot the Kalash-based firearms. It's given me an immense appreciation for them that I definitely didn't have previous.
No, it's likewise. I would say the Kalash system has, testing it honestly on the long range, I knew it wasn't as bad as people said it was. I mean, I didn't think it was much better though.
Right.
Because
there's a difference between it's not as bad as what people say and
it's actually good.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think the Kalashnikov system is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But if I were to choose a modern Cold War era,
Yeah.
it would have to be the Dragunov.
Yeah.
To be the Dragunov.
You rocked that on the course. I mean, that was such a good run.
The rifle was carrying itself. I mean, having a lightweight, it's really long, but the modern, like the SVDM's a lot shorter. Like having a lightweight, reliable, semi-automatic rifle with, and this was the 60s, designing a scope that is
crazy.
That has that type of functionality to it. You have a ranging function to it. You have a the bullet drop compensation.
Graduated aiming.
You have the windage correction
and the IR capability.
and the IR sensing capability. All of that was
that is scary, by the way.
In the 60s.
I mean, that's scary for today.
Yeah.
When you think about the implications of something like that, where everybody nowadays in at least the Western world, like the prevailing thought is everybody rocks IR because you can't be seen. Like, okay.
I would say this, like whether the opposition knows that's actually how it works is one thing. But yeah, we rolled around with IR like it was nobody's business, like nobody could see us.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. somebody, if they had that setup from the 60s, they could see.
So for absolutely hands down,
Crazy.
like the Kalashnikov system is a really cool system.
Yeah.
I would say the VZ58 is a really interesting duality to that as a little rebel of the Warsaw Pact.
Soon.
But the Dragunov for me. So I guess at that note, let's go to modern stuff.
Right. I mean, I got my introduction to firearms with the AR platform. It'd be crazy for me to answer anything other than that. I know that's really boring from like the perspectives of like, well, he likes the AR. Like, yeah, okay, I get it. But you have to understand that like this is, I didn't, as you guys know from like the previous session that we did like this, I didn't grow up shooting. My introduction to shooting was with a Mini 14, and I quickly adopted the AR platform, realizing like, okay, if I'm going to shoot anything related to performance, like this is the go-to, this is the thing to shoot. And learning the ins and outs, the guts, what parts work with what, how to get the gun to shoot the best as possible, and then getting to train tens of thousands of rounds on it over and over and shoot it on the national level at major matches. I mean, there's a connection I have to it that won't easily be broken.
So modern stuff for me, one of the biggest influences that I guess growing up for me that I've got to see as it went on was the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, and seeing how Warsaw Pact members integrated with NATO. And I didn't know it at the time, watching this stuff go on, that I would one day be working with some of those former Warsaw Pact countries who were now a part of NATO. So for me, one of the most interesting things that I got that from modern times that really piques my interest, and you could bring it up right there, are some of the adaptations. Well, this is less so an adaptation, but some of the foreign militaries, the former Warsaw Pact countries' adaptations into NATO and how that worked.
Right, how they bridge the gap.
Right. So in specific, we're looking at, in the near future, we're looking at the Polish and the Czechs. And
Two of those countries that are...
And they took a really interesting path, each of them, and I ended up working with both countries, both nations' soldiers very closely. And so I got to learn their culture, live with their culture, and see a whole lot. And I think, to me, that experience coupled with seeing this type of stuff, that interests me the most.
Clayton, awesome question. You had us going there for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Up next, question from Larry C., which is, do you hunt with your milsurps? And if so, what type of animals?
Okay.
So
animals?
Well, which type of animals do you hunt?
Okay.
I mean, I'm not really a hunter. I've gone hog hunting before, and it was a blast, but it's not something that I generally do. But I know you do spend some time in the field.
Yeah, I like hunting. I'm a rifle hunter. Surprise.
Yeah.
I'm not a shotgun hunter. In fact, I'm a pretty lousy shotgun slinger. I'm better at clubbing things with a shotgun than I am with hitting them. But that being said, I do. I mainly hunt deer and I hunt feral pigs.
Yeah.
But I don't. A lot of guys like to rack up massive kill counts. I'm really not into that. I mean, I really enjoy just going outside and watching the world.
So it's more of an experience connecting with the outdoors than it is necessarily going for like the hunt itself.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's seeing the outdoors and seeing parts of the outdoors that, because we're city dwellers, we don't see every day.
Yeah.
I
agree with that.
I lived in the country for a while, and I really miss that. That's a part of living in the country that you just simply don't get.
Right.
And so when I go hunting, I don't like taking my AI. I don't like taking my Mark 12 suppressed. I don't like taking suppressed weapons out into the field. I enjoy taking as a question asked earlier, I enjoy taking my Enfield number 4.
So not only do you hunt with your milsurp, but it's your preference.
It is my preference because to me it's what I enjoy doing. It's not and I don't. I mean, some guys, whatever, if you like shooting a large kill counts, whatever.
Yeah.
For me, I like it going out, and sometimes I don't even shoot. I just like it being outside. So being outside with one of my favorite systems, one of my favorite rifles, that's a win-win for me.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Larry. That was a good one. All right, so next question is from Tim the Enchanter. Great name, Tim. Tim asks, what was the most surprising rifle to shoot on the range?
It's easy for me to say Dragunov, and I know I've already mentioned it in this, but there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. I know the Remington performs. Gosh, I've shot it a lot. Our snipers use it. I know it. I know what it could do.
Right.
I know what the Accuracy International can do. I know this. I know that these things are performers, but we were always told that the Dragunov was just not that great.
Yeah.
But what surprised me is not just the performance. I mean, obviously, performance was amazing, but you have a lightweight system that uses a cartridge that your general purpose machine guns use, and you could even de-link ammunition to run through it. You could use it in a variety of different purposes. For that specific role, it really was a very well-designed rifle.
Yeah, home run is probably the right way to describe it. Perfect integration into the squad-based environment.
Exactly. But here's the thing, though. I would say this, and I'm not saying whether communism is good or bad at all. I'm saying that particular command economy structure, providing it with an unlimited funding, with a guy who knew what he was designing, and having a system of weapons development, having the board for developing the weapons, yielded an incredible weapon system. And it's not just that. I mean, look at the Kalashnikov.
Yeah, same thing. Where you have these, the economy structures, you say the nationalized industry for weapons manufacturing in some of these countries, like Russia, Bulgaria, so on and so. I mean, there's just to name a few.
I would say more so Russia. I mean, less so. You're looking at Romania, former Yugoslavia, China. Some of these countries. I mean, essentially, what you see is a good designer that ends up with unlimited funding, which is very difficult for us to get in stateside, because it's usually you have a funding issue, or you have an issue of checks and balances of sometimes too much on the checks and balances, basically the wrong guy to design something. I mean, you see that, and this is speaking from a former ordnance officer, and it hurts for me to say that, but the Ordnance Corps doesn't design anything anymore, because it was not able to design things in that manner. Now, that being said, we substitute a lot of that with the commercial side. And so we get a lot of commercial designs. We have a lot of competitors like yourself running things through. So it's a different system that we get things designed. But to see something like the Dragunov designed on essentially, I would imagine, is almost like unlimited funding, to design something that's actually really good.
Yeah, coming out of the 60s.
Having a lightweight system, a good cartridge supporting it, a reliable system, easy to maintain, not using any other tools, and the scope. Not only the reticle is amazing, ranging capability, wind drift, BDC, and then on top of that, freaking looking at like IR lasers and being able to detect that. I mean, who does that in the 60s?
Crazy.
So I think to me, the Dragunov is the interesting thing.
So I think if I were to answer this question, is it the most interesting rifle?
All right, sorry, battery died.
Yep.
Was rambling on for a little bit. Anyways, Dragunov for me.
So Dragunov is the answer,
yeah?
All right.
Would be the most surprising so far.
Okay. I think for me, it's got to be Kalash-based, which is interesting. It's interesting that we both gravitate toward that. And I think that there's there's got to be some sort of an influence that we've both had from what we've heard and been told about what the performance of these things are that influence this decision. I'd be shocked to hear otherwise.
I would say this. You don't see us say the SKS surprises us.
Right.
But the Kalash does. The Dragunov does.
True.
I think it's not so much that it's Russian, it's not so much that it's country oriented.
No.
It's the fact that we've always been told that these are bad systems.
Yeah, I think that is what it comes down to, that it's an inaccurate system or ineffective system, or it maxes out at 400 yards and you definitely can't shoot beyond that with it, or whatever the nonsense is that the prevailing thought process was. Shooting the 5.45 AKs has been fantastic. It's been absolutely phenomenal. I've been so interested in the 5.45 AKs after getting to shoot them, because
Well, I think yours and your 104 and Chris's AKS 74.
Yes.
Yeah.
Getting especially the 104, because it's the more modernized variant of it. And it's like, I've hesitated. I'm not going to take it and try to make it even more modern. We've got another project planned for that. But the 104 FR from Arsenal, I mean, that one, the Bulgarian AK, having shot that the way that we've shot it, and video coming soon, been phenomenal. I couldn't believe how effective it was in doing what we were trying to do with the tech we were using with it.
So that particular rifle is a lot closer to the Kalashnikovs that I saw in use on the other side of Ukraine, or inside Ukraine.
Yeah.
As I was still in Europe in 2014.
Right.
When Little Green Men started to appear. So back then, we didn't think much about those things.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started shooting it as well.
Well, I think we've probably both come to the assertion that 5.45, if we could get 5.45 in the AR system to function exactly the same as this, but to shoot the 5.45, would you take 5.45?
In the AR system?
Yeah, like let's say we have a modernized AR.
So you're talking about the opposite of this?
Yes, instead of taking a Kalash and chambering it in 223 or 5.56,
yeah.
What if you took an AR system and you developed it to shoot 5.45? Yet? I'm thinking that between those two things, having gotten to shoot both of those calibers, I don't know. Maybe this is a horrible tangent that we shouldn't be. We're into the hypothetical realm at this point.
I think so for me it's interesting. Like, Kalash with 5.56. Yeah, very nice. I like this. Is very. I could use this in warfare. Yeah, it's very easy. But like 5.45 in the AR is just a little bit too much of an abomination for me.
I don't know. I've seen guys do the 7.62 by 3.9 version.
I would say this. There has been a lot more development in the magazine technology for a 5.56 in the Kalash system than there have been a 5.45 in an AR system.
And I'm sure that it comes down to ammo availability and where it's, whatnot. But I'm just getting to the point that if people are putting 7.62 by 3.9 into the AR platform, someone's got to put 5.45 by 3.9 there too.
I would say this, a lot of times the reason you see 5.56 Kalash systems, and a lot of it had to be, came from your NATO integration from former Warsaw Pact
that makes a lot of
countries,
sense. Yeah.
which is why I think that is a very fascination in weapons design, because of that integration. You start seeing a mix of systems, a mix of ideas.
Yeah.
Oh, my phone's. Oh. Hi, love. Sorry, we're recording right now. Anyways.
All right, so I think for me, if I'm answering the question of what is the most interesting platform we've gotten to test out or shoot, it's got to be Kalash related. Shooting, especially the 5.45 stuff, getting a chance to shoot it up close and feel how it operates, and then getting to then go to the long range and see what it's doing at distance, and how when you're comparing like for like grainage levels in the rounds and against 5.56, whoo, that's been both surprising and interesting for me. And I think, as you said, Dragunov, I think again there's probably some sort of implicit level of, it's been built up to us that they're not as sufficient or they're inferior to the Western systems. And I think that has something to do with this. But I think we've learned over the course of the last 6 to 12 months that what we've been told is not true. And I think that there's some sort of a level that we knew that already, but maybe not to the degree that we've seen it take place.
To a lesser extent, I would say, the Finnish M39.
That's a good answer too. To be fair,
1,000.
We think of Mosins today in this world as
it's called the garbage rod,
the absolute trash of the milsurp, and maybe that's sort of kind of accurate for some of it, but when you come down to that Finnish variety, that thing was a laser. That was unbelievable. I couldn't believe that.
And that is not a rifle that I've trained with a lot.
Which is even scarier to think about what you could have done had you spent a ton of time on it.
Hiroshima.
Yeah. All right, so another phenomenal question that got us really talking for quite a bit of time there. Just a few left. Next up is from Turbo1889. This is a really long question, so I'm going to paraphrase a bit here. Basically, Turbo's asking our opinion on the addition of a magnifier behind a red dot system and whether or not it makes sense, whether or not it's practical, whether or not it actually adds an enhancement of capability to the otherwise, red dot based system. And then I'm going to extrapolate a little bit on this one because this is probably something I can speak on at length. We could probably do a 30-minute session on something like this to talk about it. But at a base level, does adding a magnifier to a red dot based system improve the capability at range? Yes. I think we would both answer that pretty easily.
Yeah, if that's the isolated item that we're using with nothing to compare to.
Right, yes. So if you only had a red dot and your option of shooting at distance was red dot pure or red dot with a 3x behind it, you would pick red dot with a 3x behind it, right?
Sure.
Right. So again, realistically, improves your ability to see the target and your reticle in relation to the target. But what it doesn't do is necessarily allow you to be any more accurate with the firearm, is something we've talked about numerous times over. Again, there's a difference between your ability to see and how that improves your hits versus the overall inherent accuracy at a base level. Now, from a practical perspective, if I'm setting a firearm up with a red dot, it's because I anticipate the majority of my time behind the gun is going to be within 200 yards. As a general rule. So being able to put a magnifier onto that firearm to then extend my effective range beyond 200 or 300 or 400, whatever it's going to be, is certainly valuable. But the idea of having the magnifier flip to the side, like so, for the majority of the time that I'm running the firearm, well, that doesn't sit with me all too well. So if I'm using a red dot, again, as a baseline, I'm anticipating that the firearm is going to be for majority close range work. So having a magnifier hanging off the side of the gun the whole time, adding weight, displacing the balance, it's not super desirable for me. But having the ability to have a QD-based magnifier that just simply clips off for 95% of the time that I'm working with the firearm, well, now we're talking about something quite different because I can have the firearm set up a certain way, such as this 10.5, where I've got an EOTech. Majority of the time I'm running it without a magnifier on it. If I know that I'm going to be taking the firearm to push it out to distance, well, I can clip that magnifier on, and now we're good to go. So this is the LaRue-based mount, for those who are curious. Now, if I need to, I can still utilize this firearm in a close range capacity by just simply flipping the magnifier to the side if I had to. But more so than not, it's about enhancing the capability in a very niche and specific circumstance where I'm taking a firearm that I intend to shoot at close range and pushing out to long range.
So it's kind of like, can a DMR shoot out to 1,000?
I think it's not too, it's not too dissimilar to that. Yes.
But a DMR also has a capability of going in closer. Is it optimized for shooting extreme long-range targets? No, it's not. And if you were to shoot extreme long-range targets and you had it side by side with, a precision rifle, you would choose a precision rifle with a better cartridge.
But you can still flex into that role if you need to, just like you can still flex this into the role if you need to.
It's more about the flexibility rather than it being the optimum performer in that category.
Yes.
And that being said, the interesting thing to it is that the Czechs, much similar to our Bren 2 setup right here, that's what a lot of the times they use. They use a Mayopta red dot with a magnifier behind it. Anyways.
No, I think that's worthwhile to mention. I think part of it too comes down to, right now, nowadays, we're still shooting ACOGs, right, on some of the service rifle stuff.
I would choose a red dot
for guys, right? So there are there's a flexibility given with that flip to side magnifier option that definitely gives you capability and capacity, again, to be flexible in a lot of realms that other systems might not. Now, when we contrast that, though, in a bubble, that's fine. But when we contrast it against the other prevailing option, which is an LPVO or low power variable optic, like this Vortex Razor, for me, that choice becomes very easy if my majority of my ability needs to be able to constantly flex between ranges from 5-10 yards out to 500-600 yards and then back to 5-10, then back to 600, like to constantly be flexing. I'm choosing an LPVO almost all of the time. It's because with a quality LPVO, with a large forgiving eye box, meaning that you're able to see your eye doesn't have to be perfectly behind the optic to see through it. Shooting both eyes open on 1x and being able to just slam it up to 6x is not dissimilar to shooting a red dot and then flipping up the magnifier, except I'm getting a cleaner overall image than with a magnifier, and I'm getting something that, it really doesn't give me the same level of detriment in terms of what am I doing with it when I'm not using it.
Now, I would add to that the primary arms optics with the ACSS ret. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen with ACSS is the AUG run.
Absolutely.
Shooting in wild winds, having 55 grain ammunition.
There's a massive advantage that you get with certain types of reticles, such as the ACSS, that you just simply don't have in a red dot. Yeah. Being able to see your target better by flipping up the 3x magnifier is fine, and that's great. But it still doesn't necessarily give you a better point of reference for aiming, especially for windage when you're shooting 400, 500 yards. Yeah. So having that reticle, which is designed to be able to do that, well, that's a massive advantage. A massive advantage. So hopefully that answers the question for you, Turbo. And ultimately, will we shoot something like the 3x magnifier on the course? Yeah, we'll shoot it. It's the prevailing setup for like the Mark 18 quintessential setup. So there will be a time where we definitely do that.
We're doing the Czech rifles.
To be fair, correct. Even if we get away from the AR based firearms and we go into the Bren, that's an option as well.
Sure.
All right, final question from Mark C. Thoughts on collaborations in the future? It'd be cool to see you do something with the guys at InRange, specifically the 2-gun matches that they put on.
Collaborations, it would be absolutely, I think it would be phenomenal. There's a lot of knowledge to be shared within a lot of these channels.
And we've already done some to date so far.
Sure, yeah. I mean, especially when we're talking, some of the collaborations that I think a lot of people don't see are the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. Spending a lot of time talking to people about, hey,
what's your experience on this? What have you seen with that?
Or seeing if someone's done a video.
Yeah.
Would you do anything different on it?
Yeah.
But if we're talking about specifically for the match realm, I think there's a little bit more that needs to be sort of elaborated on that. And I think specifically you as a competitor,
sure.
The time is a main aspect.
I think that the match shooting, and getting to go out and shoot some of these guys' matches who put stuff on, like, it would be a blast to do it. Yeah. The problem that comes down ultimately is that going out and shooting matches is an insane time commitment, as Henry says. I would know, having done years worth of match shooting where I was shooting basically every weekend and practicing during the week when I was competing at a national level and going to nationals and trying to win the thing. Like, those were...
Trying to?
Well, state stuff, sure, nationals.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but like my point being that there's a huge time commitment that's associated. So like, you go out to some of these big matches, you've got multiple days of travel, potentially, on both ends, or at least full days of travel. If you're driving, it's sometimes multiple days of travel on both ends, and then you've got like 2 to 3 days of shooting, of which you spend, I don't know, a grand total of 5 to 10 minutes max shooting during those 2 to 3 days. And so when your goal is to go out and shoot matches and to win, you can justify it to some shape and degree. It's a lot harder from a time commitment and justification perspective when it's like, oh, we're just going to go do this one match this one time. Because realistically, to go to a match without practice and prep and really spending a committed time and an asserted time in advance, in my opinion, it's a complete waste. I would never go to a match without being trained and prepped in advance of it. It's kind of like if you imagine a boxer or a UFC fighter, you know, they get their match or their fight scheduled out 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer, you know? Mm-hmm. What do you think they're doing in those 3 to 6 months? They're training all the time to be the best version of themselves on the day where they have to throw down. And it's the same for match shooting, at least for me, in terms of how I would treat and approach match shooting.
So you know me, I mean, I would show up with a damn Sterling and shoot like a PCC match, but it's, for me, it's coming back down to the time. I mean, I don't think people realize that the classic shows take anywhere from 24 to 36 man hours, and that's man hours, not just a day and a half to produce.
Yeah.
And the PAs typically take about 4 to 6 hours to cut on post-production. Yeah. That is not including the film time, not including me driving across town with a trunk full of not
your armament. It's fine. Your armament.
Usually encountered firearms. I mean, yeah. Anyways, and then on top of that, you know, we're trying to take care of customers with SBI.
Yeah.
We're making sure that not only that, you know, product development for SBI, and then on top and family, you know, to be more important than
that is a big piece. That is a big piece that's relevant.
And you know, to your point of, you know, doing the best and all of that type of stuff, could we just go out and just, you know, like, hey guys, sticks out for Harambe, let's just go and shoot this match with, you know, a freaking Scorpion VZ61. Yeah, we could do that, for sure. I mean, it's not saying that we can't do it, but, you know, what does it mean to travel that time and take that time away from family that we already are strained upon right now? Yeah. And to me, that is a greater priority. You know, first of all, pushing quality content for 9-hole, spending time with my family, you know, on that, you know, like on the greatest priorities of things, and then also, you know, Slate Black's operations and success and endeavors and in developing new things, and then crazy, right? You know, our jobs. Yeah.
Yep. Because again, this isn't a full-time gig, right? So completely understand why people would be interested in seeing us shoot matches.
And I'm not saying no.
No, I mean, it may be something we can try to fit in. Yeah. But again, it comes down to everything. There's a finite amount of time, and you know, if you could pick a couple things that we could focus on, you know, that's basically what we do. We sit down, we say we've got this huge list of stuff we want to do. What are the ones that we have to do? What are the ones that are the most important or are going to be the best for you guys?
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of it comes down to. But in general, I mean, I'm not averse to shooting matches.
Sure, yeah. Of course not.
So
is that all?
That is the final Q&A that we're gonna be fielding for this session of the Q&A segment. So if you guys want to have your own questions answered, of course, we do try to spend time in the comments section and still try to read everything that's posted, despite the fact that there are thousands of comments posted all the time. You know, we still try to go through and we still try to read and respond to them. You know, that really is the, you know, it's something we try to do, but we can't necessarily always guarantee we're going to be able to do. But the Q&A from the patrons is something that we are going to commit to always being able to do. So
now this particular Q&A were the pilot of the Q&As from Patreon, and we did say we were going to open it up to YouTube and Facebook. So the next time you see a Q&A RFQ, request for questions, I suppose, in this setting, go ahead and respond with your question. You may not, you know, get picked off the bat just because it's impossible to do all of them.
Yep.
But you know, every now and then we'll open it up to YouTube and Facebook as well.
Absolutely.
I do have one thing though. We promised people that we would give them the giveaway items.
Right. The
And
15 slate stops.
we have selected the 15,
Randomly generated,
and here they are. And that's for Patreon and Facebook. YouTube. So you guys have all, the lucky winners. If you wouldn't mind responding, we'll start a thread underneath each of those categories. On Facebook, please send us a message on the channel. On Instagram as well, send us a DM with your handle that you were selected with. On YouTube, we're going to start a thread, a comments thread. Respond to that with your handle and a contact method. And then Patreon, we'll just contact you. So, have we got anything else?
No, I think from a Q&A perspective, that's pretty much it. I mean, I know there's, again, thousands of questions that we get all the time. I mean, that's not really an exaggeration either. There are questions on every video, hundreds and hundreds of them. So, we're going to continue to do the best we can, and we hope you guys enjoyed sitting down with us and having the session here. Very informal, very off the cuff, and just getting to enjoy, the conversation.
Indeed.
Till next time, guys. We'll see you.
Merry Christmas.
Do you know what time it is?
Say it slower, Josh.
Do you read this one?
Put it a little lower under his eye.
716 is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, red con 1, green to green. How copy over?
Steel 96, this is 716.